Have you ever stopped to think about a seemingly simple question that could keep you awake all night? Who's thinking right now? No, this isn't some cheap philosophical trick. It's literally the most fundamental question of your existence. You wake up, brush your teeth, drink coffee, feel joy when you see a funny meme, get annoyed in traffic. But who or what is experiencing all of this inside your head? Imagine that 40 years ago, a set of atoms came together in a very specific way. Mostly oxygen, about 65% of the total mass, but also carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and a few sprinkles of calcium and phosphorus. These elements combine in the universe all the time. There's nothing special about that. But here's the bizarre part. One day this specific combination of atoms woke up and said, "Hey, I'm so-and-so." This happened to you, to me, to everyone you know. When you really think about it, it's absolutely strange that a bunch of rocks, air, water, and chemicals have a sense of identity, isn't it? And here we start diving into one of science's greatest mysteries, consciousness. For centuries, we've tried to fit this subjective experience into the neat boxes of science, philosophy, and spirituality, with results that are, let's say, intriguing. Is consciousness just a byproduct of the brain functioning? Or something that goes beyond matter? Why do you know you're alive while a rock has no clue it exists? Let's start with the basics. A philosopher named Ned Block created a definition that serves as a starting point for any discussion about consciousness. According to him, we have two completely different mental dynamics that are intimately related to our inner life. The first he calls access consciousness, and the second, phenomenological consciousness. Access consciousness is what you use when you're walking down the street and suddenly see someone you know waving at you. There's an automatic process. You perceive, recognize, identify, and react. It's like your mind is an operating system processing information and making decisions based on what comes through your senses or from your own thoughts. It's operational, almost automatic, and we can measure this relatively well. Phenomenological consciousness is completely different. You know when you're lying on the couch, close your eyes, and simply feel that thing people call being in touch with yourself. You don't even need to explain what it is. If you're wondering whether you know it or not, just close your eyes for 3 seconds and you'll be absolutely certain that you know. It's that feeling of inner life, of being yourself, a unique signature. That defines what it means to be specifically you. And here's the kicker. This second consciousness has a crazy characteristic. It defines what it means to be something. The experience of being you is an experience only you know. Just like the experience of being any other person is something only that person will know. It's something completely non-transferable, impossible, to be fully shared with another human being. This difference is crucial because the first consciousness, access consciousness, overlaps with the idea of attention, and therefore with processes we can measure. For example, you can identify people who systematically have trouble keeping this access flowing. This is the true definition of attention deficit. Not those simplified definitions from medical manuals, but the difficulty of maintaining access to consciousness of information coming from the outside world or from one's own thoughts. And here we have an interesting subdivision. You have attention for the outside world and attention for your own thoughts. Some people are super perceptive to the external world, but terrible at self-awareness, at evaluating their own thoughts and reflecting on themselves. Others are the opposite. Super self-aware but kind of disconnected from what's happening around them. This dichotomy in the domain of access consciousness determines one of the main personality characteristics that exists. The person who has consciousness oriented toward the external world is usually extroverted. Why? Because they're oriented outward, pay attention to what happens around them, and act based on that. When they talk to someone, they're attentive to what the person says, they engage, they get entertained when it's entertaining, sad when it's sad. This creates powerful social experiences. On the other side, the person with high self-awareness is usually introverted. The very definition of introversion is being immersed in one's own thoughts. And curiously, extroverted people tend to converge in their ways of thinking. They like to add to things, to improve something that already exists. Introspective people, on the other hand, usually act from what first emerges in their brains. They're more propositive, more innovative. That's why almost all the great thinkers in history were introverts. but curiously pulled monumental social movements without having any natural ability for it. Their thing is the inside, not the outside. But back to the central question. If we can explain access consciousness through sense organs processing information, where does consciousness itself come in? If I'm accessing information through my eyes, ears, touch, or through specific electrical activity in the brain that generates mental representations, where's the consciousness in that? Apparently, I don't need it. The machine works by itself. This is the problem that David Chalmers, a very famous Australian philosopher, called the ghost in the machine. Consciousness can be seen as if it were a ghost in a machine. The machine works independently of the ghost's existence or presence. From what we understand about machines, they work because their internal gears are articulated sufficiently to function, as long as they have energy. So technically, you don't need consciousness. So much so that Chalmers proposed a classic thought experiment. Imagine a world where beings exist exactly like us, except they don't have consciousness. These are the philosophical zombies. They talk, laugh, cry, argue, behave exactly like conscious beings, but inside, nothing. No subjective experience. You could be talking to a person right now and they might not have any consciousness. How would you know? This means that from Chalmers' point of view, consciousness doesn't reduce to just brain machinery, because you can have the machinery and not have the consciousness. Thomas Nagel took this idea even further in a classic 1974 article called What Is It Like to Be a Bat? He's not talking about sonar or nocturnal habits. He's talking about subjective experience. What actually happens inside a bat when it uses sonar? What would it be like to sleep upside down, to see through sound? The answer is obvious and scary at the same time. No matter how much we study, we'll never know. It's impossible for you to imagine what it would be like to have these abilities because the experience doesn't exist as a prediction. It only exists when it's lived in first person. There are things you first need to have in order to know what they're like. There's no point in trying to imagine. There's another fantastic thought experiment. The color scientist. Imagine Anna, a woman who knows absolutely everything about colors. Wave frequencies, optical properties, how the brain processes colors, neural interactions, everything. She's an absolute genius on the subject. There's just one detail. She's never seen a color because she was born blind, but she paints beautiful and precise works of art using molds and textures. One day, Anna has revolutionary surgery and begins to see. The question is, when she sees red for the first time, does something surprising happen? Or is red exactly as she imagined it would be? Everyone has the intuition that something new and impactful happens. This means that the experience of red doesn't reduce to the physical properties of red. There's something more, something that can only be lived. These examples show that the fundamental question of conscious experience doesn't reduce to material aspects. The classic dichotomy between matter and spirit, between physical and mental, might not be as absurd as the pragmatic materialism of our times suggests. Not that it's necessarily correct, but it's not so ridiculous when you look at the limitations of the purely materialist approach. It's easy to say that consciousness emanates from the brain. Congratulations, everyone agrees. But how? How does it emanate as experience? So far, these examples show that it's not clear to anyone. When you understand all the physical properties of something, you still don't understand exactly how subjective experience emanates. Science approaches the problem of consciousness always from a perspective of separation between who studies and what is studied. This is called epistemological separation between subject and object. You have people as experimental objects, put them in an MRI machine, do electroencephalography, and look for something in that person that will apply to you and other people. But you're always looking at that person as an extrinsic being, as an object of study. But maybe there are aspects of consciousness, specifically this phenomenological facet, that aren't reducible to this separation between observer and observed. Maybe it only emerges from direct first-person experience. Daniel Dennett, who died recently and was a fantastic guy, had a different approach. He said that the problem of phenomenological consciousness is a false problem. This consciousness would arise as you access your own thoughts, which are mere computations, through an analytical point of view. When you access yourself, something like a hall of mirrors is created. When you put one mirror in front of another, it seems like there are infinite images multiplying, but it's an illusion. Like when you draw a cube on a page and it seems to be coming out in 3D, or those figures that sometimes look like a chalice, sometimes like two faces kissing. Dennett used the image of magic. It's as if your brain were the magician who sits in his own audience and is fooled by his own trick. According to this view, phenomenological consciousness doesn't exist the way we think. It arises as a trick of the mind, an illusion generated by brain processes themselves. Like when you watch a magic show and swear you saw something impossible, but it was just skillful manipulation. One way to understand this is to think that we have a hierarchy of ways of thinking, and there's a level that monitors what's happening in the internal elements themselves. Breathing tension, heartbeats, muscle tension, reflexes, accumulated memories of recent emotions, deep conditioning. Consciousness would be like a mirror that reflects what goes on inside the body, and the mind would be a clever narrator trying to organize all this mess. Many call this somatic interpretation. The brain creates meaning from bodily markers. Sometimes, this meaning is more sensory than rational. Maybe everything we call I is just this hall of mirrors, a reflection monitoring itself, like a mental editing trick where the brain observes its own functioning and creates the illusion of a solid identity. There wouldn't be a pilot in command, just a complex sequence of cognitive processes communicating with each other. It might seem scary at first glance, but it's also liberating. Maybe the mind is more artist than engineer. And here we come to a fascinating question about where exactly consciousness enters the equation. Did it emerge with a fully developed human brain? With animal brains? A plant? A single bacterium? Or, if matter can be conscious, would a single atom be too? In research with animal behavior experts, 92% believe non-human primates are conscious, but only 73% extend this to other mammals. For octopuses, it drops to 64%, birds, 61%, and for insects, only 51% of researchers believe they have any sense of themselves. Our instincts about consciousness become increasingly shaky as we move away from being similar to us. No matter how much we advance with machines, neuroimages, and complex theories, there's something that always escapes: the feeling. That which no one can access for you, the taste of your morning coffee, the color of the sky that only you see that specific way, the memory that squeezes your chest without warning. This is where the debate between materialism and dualism gets stuck, and philosophical reflection gains strength. Maybe consciousness is less a problem to solve, and more a mystery to contemplate. After all this, it's hard to look inside yourself the same way, isn't it? Consciousness, which seemed like just a technical little word, reveals itself as an entire universe, full of nuances, layers, and infinite mirrors. And now that you know these ideas, what changes in how you live the present? When you catch yourself distracted, questioning your emotions or trying to understand another person, will you remember that there's a colossal mystery behind all of this? Is it possible to train attention and expand this internal perception, cultivate a deeper and more authentic consciousness, instead of simply reacting to the world on autopilot? In the end, maybe we'll never have a definitive answer about what consciousness is, but the journey of questioning, where self-knowledge, science, and philosophy walk together, might be more valuable than any final conclusion. Because deep down, the greatest mystery isn't how consciousness works. It's the fact that you're here, now, being you, experiencing this exact moment of existing, because knowledge is just the beginning.